Hello, everyone. Thank you, all the people who are joining us online at this time. We are very happy to have you all here, and we expect to have good attendance. So thank you all who are on time for this. So my name is Sebastian Castellanos. Let me just put my camera here quickly. I'm the research lead for NUMO, the New Urban Mobility Alliance, and we're very happy to welcome you to this webinar series of resilience and transportation. For this first series, this first webinar on the series, we have the cities of Santiago, of Buenos Aires, and of Bogotá. In particular, we have Juan Carlos González, Lucila Capelli, and Sergio Martinez, who will be talking a bit about some of their strategies that they have been using to deal with this pandemic. And we will have a brief discussion at the end about how this has changed their plans on resilience and how this will inform whatever is coming next. So again, for this series, we are very, very happy to be partnering with GIZ, the German government, TUMI, EUROCLIMA, and Mobilize Your City. We are, again, very, very happy to be starting this today. And please stay tuned for the following series, for the following webinars in our series, which will be happening every 2 weeks. So you will be hearing from us about the next one. So if you all agree with that, our panelists, I'm just going to go ahead and start. So we will be starting the first presentation by Lucila Capelli from the city of Buenos Aires, Argentina. Lucila is the Undersecretary of Mobility Planning for Buenos Aires. Lucila has a bachelor's degree in political science from the Universidad of Buenos Aires, and she has postgraduate studies from the Universidad de San Andrés and the University of Leeds. So Lucila, I'm just gonna hand it over to you. Finally, the last thing I would say before passing it on to you is that I've had the great opportunity of working with all our panelists in different capacities. So we really have a very, very very good panelists today that will be sharing some of their experiences. And again, I'm just really happy to be able to work again with you guys on this. So thank you for being part of this opportunity. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Lucila.
Okay, thank you. I will present what we are doing regarding transportation in Buenos Aires City. I would like to thank to the institutional team of the Secretary of Transport and Public Works for the presentation. Because of the crisis, I didn't have time. So thank you to Julieta and Dana, that I think they are online. This presentation is a long presentation, so but it's like a guideline, so we can share this information to everyone after the meeting. I will try to skip some slides in order to respect the 10 minutes. So in Argentina, we have nowadays 300 cases. I think this is the yesterday statistics. We started with the first week that was in the middle of March, that to reduce the trips around the metropolitan area. It's very important to highlight that Buenos Aires City is around 3 million inhabitants, but we have around 15 inhabitants in the metropolitan area. So we are a massive city, and our problems are very huge. So we start in the middle of March, as you can see in this slide, with the reduction of the circulation of people. That was, this is all the national measures that were taken. National government, we are a federal government, so it took a lot of measures, and then also were taken by us in the city level. We suspend the classes, schools and universities. We promote the remote working, not only for the public sector, but also for the private sector. We close the vibrant cultural life of Buenos Aires. So we close theaters, cinemas, and all that. we suspend all the intercity movements, buses and flights, and we close the borders for the international flights also. We only have flights of repatriation. That was the first 10 days before the quarantine. And since the 23rd of March, around, we are in a strong quarantine where all the people must stay at home, work at home, study at home, except of the essential activities that we know that are around of 800,000 people around the Buenos Aires and the people from the suburbs of Buenos Aires that comes work to the city, and are the health system, transportation, and all the essential activities. Here you will see all the measures that the Buenos Aires city implement. I will talk about them in more detail then. And this is the definition of the phases that the Ministry of Health designed. We are still in the orange side of the graph, thank God. So we are working with two big dimensions, that is the rate of infections and the capacity of the health system. And all the decisions are taken by the Ministry of Health, and the supporting areas as transportation are implementing strategies regarding the where we are in this graph. So we have two phases. We have three stages or three phases in Buenos Aires and in the metropolitan area. The first one was the disincentivization of trips. That was in the first days. Was 1 month ago, but it seems to be 1 year. Then the quarantine, that is the phase 2, and then the phase 3, that is the future or the next weeks that we are planning. In the phase 1, we implement 5 main strategies. That is we maintain the public transport offer. That was very difficult because Buenos Aires city doesn't. We only have under our administration the subways, but buses and trains are under national government administration. So we need a huge coordination with them to maintain the transport offer. We start giving we start to desensitize the demand also, and we can explain that in more detail. Also the rush hours, and we start promoting alternative transport modes. That includes, of course, the bikes and the walking, but also, and that is was difficult for us, but we start promoting the free parking in the city to promote the car or the car sharing alternatives. And also we start to restrict the access to the public transport in order to guarantee the social distance. Here is more detail about how we work to maintain the offer. And here is the measures we start to implement in order to disincentivize demand. Was very important to start talking about. Here you will see in this graph the reasons why the people is traveling on public transport in the metropolitan area. Employment 46%, studies 21%. So we start for each reason we have different measures. Rush hours was mostly a communicational policy to start saying to the people not to travel or to avoid travel during the rush hours. Promote the alternative modes with free parking in all the city, and also environmental area in the central part of Buenos Aires. We took all the restrictions. And we have with the national government, we have restrictions to access to the transport. That is only people seat can be in public transport. That means that we reduce the capacity of transport units a lot. In subways, we have a reduction of the 73% of the capacity per transport unit, and in buses, around the 64% of reduction of capacity per unit. That means a huge challenge for the offer of public transport, and we need to promote also different offers of mobility. The results, because I have not a lot of time, I like a lot this graph because it shows how the demand was during the last months, around 1 month. The gray side is when we start to reduce the circulation, and you will see an important reduction of the use of public transport, not of cars, but yes, of public transport. And the yellow side is the quarantine, and there you will see a historical demand of public transport. We have a 95% of reduction of demand in subways, so we are living in a historical moment. So we are now at the end of this graph. We are still in phase 2. This is more detail about what we are doing and communication. We are also working to in bus stops and subway stations with the demarcation of the social distance. This is a very huge program that we were working. And so in order to explain the end of this graph, that is the yellow one, I will explain what we were doing in transportation. We maintain the offer. The first 2 weeks we went to a subway offer, a Sunday offer of transportation, but now we are in a normal offer that is around, we are around in the 95% of the offer of transportation. We taxis and also yes, ride sharing is available, but we suspend public bicycles, scooters, parking, so because we don't want the people to be around in the city. We also close the 59 point of access of the city, and we are having a very strong controls of security in all the access to the city. So I have no time. We are also working to give logistics to the health system in order to have more capacity. We are using taxis that are not with a lot of work these days, and they are going to be sanitary vehicles to transport people with coronavirus from the hospitals to isolation. So we are using our capacity of the transportation system in order to provide logistics to the health system. This is an example. We are also with the scholar buses. We are also adapting these buses for transport inside the slums of coronavirus cases. And the phase 3, that is the last one, and it didn't start yet. We are trying to work with which are gonna be the first workers and activities that are gonna restart working in the next weeks, because economy is starting to pressure a lot to recover. So we are working with changing starting times of some activities, changing modal shift of some activities, promoting a lot of moving in bicycle and walking for less than 5 kilometers distances. And so we are working very hard, not only the transportation area, but also all the Buenos Aires city government with the national government and the province for the next step, that is phase 3, that we're gonna restart some activities that are essential for the economy. So I will give you all this presentation that is very long and very deep in the information, and I will be here for any question. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Lucila. That was very, very useful. Just so people know, we have a Q&A section in GoToWebinar. So if you have any questions, please type them there and we will be able to answer them in the second part of the webinar. So let's move now to Santiago. So Juan Carlos Gonzalez, Head of Staff of the Ministry of Transport and Telecommunications in Chile. Juan Carlos is an expert in transport regulation from the University of Chile. He used to be legislative head of the Ministry of Transport of Chile between 2010 and 2014. And has also been manager of Transurbano Foundation, an NGO dedicated to sustainable public transport. As I mentioned, he's currently the head of staff with the Chilean Ministry of Transport and Telecommunications, and he works very closely with the current minister, Mrs. Gloria Hutt. So Juan Carlos, what did you tell us a bit about some of the of your own experiences and what you have been doing in Chile and in Santiago in particular?
Okay. Please, the next slide. Thank you. This is a scope about the dimensions of our system. Our system is called Santiago, or RED, is the new name of the system. We have the numbers that you can see in the slide. I will try to remark 4.6 million of trips now. And 7 million inhabitants and 6 bus operators with metro and urban rails. Next, please. And this is the composition of our system. You can see the numbers, 6,700 buses with 26,000 workers for this composition of trips, 3 million in buses and 2.3 million in metro. No, it's an integrated system. No, the system is full integrated at 100% between metro, buses, and the urban rail. Next, please. The measures adopt for the authority. The first one and the main is a declaration of a state of emergency in the Chilean law that calls a state of catastrophe, no, estado de catástrofe, and it means the time of this state is 90 days, no, and it starts in the middle of March and in March 15th, and it runs until July 15th, no, June 15th. So that measure means a lot of restriction, the isolation of groups, some efforts for the health infrastructures, the suspensions of classes in schools and universities, and all the massive events and all the shopping centers. A set of special laws to make to flexibilize the labor relationship, especially thinking about the work from home, or teletrabajo, we call them. I don't know what's the correct translation, but and some exception regimes, and the most important for us is to ensuring the supply chain and the food and medicines, and maintaining the operation of public transport. So the equation with to sustain the offer of mobility with a very decreasing of the trips is difficult. No? The next slide, please. The effects of that measures and that situation in the transport system. Excuse me. Here, okay. We have a problem with the. Excuse me. We have a problem in the connection. So the measures in transport sectors is sustain the offer of public transport, sanitation. It's very similar to the Argentina, the Buenos Aires measures that described Lucila before. But I would like to remark the exceptional financial guarantee for transport contracts, no? Because we have to maintain to sustain the offer of buses specifically and metro, but we don't have the same income that is usual, because the trips are we have the 15 or 20% of the demand that is the usual demand of a working day. So we adapt the programs to the summer levels, no, and we have some modifications in the contracts to maintain the income of the companies, no. So and I would like to remark that we're working with the health authority with a DRT service for the health services personnel, no. Maybe in the Q&A we can have a deep discussion about this. The next one, please. So we have some impact in the transport authority also, because the behavior of our personnel, of our staff, is changed. But for the situation, no, we have a curfew, and we have quarantines and kind of dynamic quarantines, no. That's closing some sectors of the city, and the sector where our offices are located is a closed sector, no. It's the downtown of Santiago. So we have a massive work at home. We install quickly a digital system to approve the documents. On the formal acts, administrative acts are made by the digital way. We have to take a lot of information to the people, because we have some episodes of crowding in metro stations, and the problem was the information to the people specifically. No, we have some concerns about the road safety, because the streets are empty, the speeds are increasing. So the people in an emotional state, a special state of his emotions, and we have some accidents, no, we're very lamentable. And we have a close coordination with the Ministry of Health, Economy, and Inland. No, Inland is home office now. So because everything is happening very quickly, no, we don't have a lot of time to the planification of the studies or some. We have to make decisions very quickly. So the coordination with the authority is very important. Next, please. Some lessons we have from the crisis at the moment, because we're not in the peak of the crisis. We think today we have 8,300 contagious people, and we have the 50% if from Santiago, no. In the country we had 8,300 and 50% in Santiago, and we have 94 people that passed away, and 41 are from Santiago. No, so some lessons that we have at the moment is that the regulated contracts, the contracts sector, transport sector, are permits and faster reaction to from the authority, and we have some agreements to sustain the offers public transport in the regions. Difference from Santiago, we don't have that system of regulated contracts, and the offer of public transport had decreased very dramatically, no, because there is no trips, so it's very difficult to sustain the offer with that model, no. The maintenance of the supply chains also is very important. We have some sanitary customs and sanitary controls, and usually all the operators of the freight transport are out of these controls, or we have that preference in the roads. No, the technology is an ally, no, a very important ally. We have the ambition to put on functions some apps for control of the movement of the people that have contagions, no, like it happens on Madrid, no, or Korea, no. So the technology is very important to inform the people, because everything happens very quickly. So if you put some metro stations on operation, or suspend some services, or some times of the services, you have to inform the population, no? And the public subsidies can collaborate with the subsistence of the companies in the crisis moment, because we have the regulated contracts, no? Because in the future, in 3 or 4 months, maybe we have a normalization of the activities, but we need the public transport system, no? And surely when we return to the normality, that will be the same, no? Probably some people will take the position of work from home. We don't know what will happen with the classes of the students. Maybe some classes or some courses will be made from e-learning, no? So probably we don't have the same quantity of people in the streets, no? And the transport have to customize from this, no? This is our report to this webinar. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Juan Carlos. This is excellent. I already have a ton of questions to ask the both of you, but we're going to finish the presentations with Sergio Martinez. He's the Undersecretary of Mobility Policy and the Mobility Secretary in Bogotá. So Sergio is a civil engineer from the Universidad Industrial de Santander. He has a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Texas, and civil engineering with emphasis on transportation from the University of Texas in Austin. So again, I've had the opportunity to work with Sergio in the past in topics related to mobility, and in particular to bike sharing and scooter sharing. So really eager to hear what you have to tell us from Bogotá, Sergio. Yep, that's good. We can't hear you though.
Okay. You have sound now?
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, good. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Juan Carlos and Lucila. Thank you, NUMO, for the invitation, and thank you, everybody, attending this invitation. You know, like Juan Carlos was saying, this is a catastrophe. You know, it's really crazy. So I'm glad to see that most of the things that we've been doing are being implemented also by another leading cities in a region. It's been complicated, but you know, these sort of opportunities to share knowledge are very valuable. And so here we go. I think a little different than in most other cities. In Bogotá, we had the chance to do a drill before going into quarantine, before going into citywide lockdown. I think that was a really smart decision made by our mayor. This was before the national government declared the quarantine. And so basically my presentation is gonna be separated into these three parts. What was the drill? What is the lockdown that we are in right now? And what do we think is gonna happen, or what are we trying to make happen after the city, you know, starts reopening again? This is a quote by the Secretary of Mobility, and this pretty much defines everything that we've been doing, you know, these past weeks, and this is what's gonna continue being our motto. And is we really need to try everything that we can. If we fail, if we make mistakes, it's understandable, it's okay. We're just gonna try to fix it next time. So first I'm gonna talk about the drill. The drill lasted 4 days. The purpose was, you know, of course, like everybody else is doing, to implement social distancing, but also to prevent mass movements of people and panic shopping, because, you know, we saw it coming that the national government, it was gonna implement the quarantine for the whole country. So basically, the drill was telling people, you know, you need to stay home unless you are, you know, working on health, or you need to go out as a patient, or you provide special care to people, like for example, people that takes care of elders, or you know, somebody with special needs, and a few other categories of people, like for example, essential public sector employees. And I want to highlight the word essential because everybody that is not essential, we were sent home, of course, to work from home. But you know, the idea was, of course, to give example at all the public entities and to really start doing work from home. And of course, all the security apparatus, not only the official, you know, police and military, but all the security agencies that provide security services to companies, residential complexes, etc. So we've been doing many different restrictions and giving a lot of exceptions. So I'm just going to try to summarize some of the most important, or the ones that have been more controversial, I guess. So basically, the city closed. You know, it was defined a certain category of trips that were allowed, basically to get food, to go to a pharmacy, to take out your pet, and very importantly, it was defined that only one person per household will go out to do that. It was very important, and it was highlighted everywhere and in every discussion that we needed to guarantee the supply chain of everything. Because, you know, we've been seeing, of course, the toilet paper mania around the world and the hand sanitizer craziness. And so it was very important, not only that we actually guarantee the supply chain, but that people knew that there were not going to be any shortages of anything. And I guess different than in the US, in other countries, we do have regularly a type of delivery services from restaurants that is very prominent. I know some other cities are starting to get this as well, the Rappi kind of things, and those were allowed too, because it was determined that it was preferred that the majority of the people stayed home and just called for these delivery people to bring food or medical services or wherever it was needed. We started monitoring the occupation of public transportation very heavily. Different than other cities, we have an issue, and is that our operators are private, and so it's different. You know, when you own the buses basically as a city and you just make all the decisions. Here you need to go and talk to them. Of course, they understood, but there were some problems in trying to adjust exactly how we should run the system, kind of like the way that Buenos Aires mentioned, Lucila mentioned. We started testing if we operated with the coverage of a Sunday or of a holiday, and then we really needed to make adjustments there. We established cleaning protocols not only for buses, but also for taxis and for all the delivery people. And of course, we had to send the police out to control, and sadly to issue fines to people that were not, acting accordingly to the restrictions. And like many other cities, we did a lot of advertising, telling people to stay home and wash their hands frequently, all the other considerations that you all know. And there was something particular. This drill started on a Friday, then Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday, because that Monday was a holiday. And so it's very traditional that when we have a holiday, a lot of people from Bogotá go out to the surrounding municipalities. And even though the mayor was very clear and said nobody's allowed, everybody should stay at home, well, a lot of people left. And then there was a debate on whether we should let those people come back or not. There was on social networks, there was a lot of discussion on whether the city should, quote, punish these people for not following the recommendations, especially because they will go to rural areas in which, the medical services are, of course, weaker than in Bogotá. And so at the end, it was decided that they were going to be allowed to return, but we split how they returned. For private vehicles, it was depending on their ending number on their vehicle's plate. One day, odd numbers, the other day, even numbers. And we set up different timeframes for the coming of intermunicipal buses and also for freight trucks. And something that I think was very interesting is that, and this is what you're seeing in the picture, the people in the cars were allowed to re-enter the city only if they fill out this form. This format, of course, has no legal authority or any way to be enforced in any way, but it basically had two goals. One, to help us to understand why they left, why, even though they were told not to leave, they decided to do it. And this was thinking on, how are we gonna improve our restrictions and our exceptions looking forward. But the other reason was to, kind of like give them slap in the hand. It's like, hey, you were told not to leave. Why did you leave? Now you have to at least sign this. You have to give me this per vehicle with all the information that of all the people that are coming back in your vehicle, and you have to sign it. You have to sign a compromise that you're going to respect the quarantine. Again, this has no way to be enforced, but it was more like a social exercise. And then this drill was citywide. It was only established for Bogotá, although the surrounding state, the governor, decided to join efforts and pretty much apply the same restrictions, but not for the rest of the country. And so at the end of the drill, the president actually decreed the national quarantine, and so they overlap. So that's what I'm saying here. Now we're talking national. Most of the measures and exceptions that we established during the drill in Bogotá were maintained. Again, city remained closed, except for freight to maintain the supply of products and with some exceptions. And we also started playing with other things. And I'm going to be talking a little more about the bicycle lanes later, but basically, as of right now, we created an additional 35 kilometers of temporary bicycle lanes. We've been operating the public transportation system at, roughly 50% of the capacity for both BRT and the more zonal feeder buses. Taxis are allowed, but since we don't want them just like, circling around the city, we put a restriction on that their trips could only be held either by phone or by app. And the latest and biggest change that we made is that we set up a restriction based on gender on when you could go out for those allowed trips. Like if you need to go and get groceries, now there's 1 day for women and 1 day for men. This has been, like everything pretty much controversial, but the reason it was decided to do it like this instead of, like, for example, based on their ending number on our national document, our cédula, it's because we wanted to avoid the police having to call people, get close to people, ask them, and exchange the document. So it was easier to just, see if it's a man or a woman. Of course, if you're transgender, you can go out based on your gender definition of yourself. But, nevertheless, that started a few days ago and has been controversial. Just one, something that I think is kind of funny. It's, of course, men disrespect this a lot more than women. We have to give out, I think, 610 fines yesterday to men for disrespecting their allowed day. Going back to bicycles, Juan Carlos and Lucina mentioned this. We really need to continue promoting sustainable transportation, and because I guess the main way that we're trying to avoid infections is by keeping social distance. The bicycle really has been setting up itself as probably the most hygienic way to move in the city. And before we started the drill, like, we saw that coming and we started playing. I'm sure most of you know that in Bogotá we have a Sunday ciclovia, which is pretty much closing about 120 kilometers of roads to cars. And so we started doing that during regular days. Of course, we were testing and measuring everything. And I think it's important that we took a trial and error approach, like I mentioned before, that's the motto for our secretary. And on day 2, when we tried to implement the whole network, we really had severe congestion problems. And so we scaled back. This was before the drill. Now, during the actual lockdown, we set up in what we're seeing right now. It's working for everybody, which is about 35 kilometers. But we're planning already on adding another 45 temporary. And most importantly, we're thinking about how to make those temporary lanes into permanent lanes. This has been challenging, of course. We've been doing it with traffic cones, and sadly, some people like to steal our cones. Also because, private vehicles like to invade the temporary bike lanes. And a problem that was mentioned as well, and that we're seeing in other cities, is that empty streets are equaling higher speeds, which obviously is not what we want. So we're trying to, balance everything. But in general, we've had really good feedback, not only from our users and our non-users, but also, we've actually got some coverage on the news media around the world, which kind of like surprises. But the important thing is that we're seeing progress. We're trying to find the sweet spot. And like I said, we're trying to make all those temporary kilometers into permanent ones. Another thing that we did is we're trying to tweak our bus system. We've been creating special routes that connect to hospitals to take the people that work there. Here are just some examples of the flyers with the details. And I think our overall purpose, which was to reduce the number of trips, have largely been accomplished. You see some pictures of our empty streets. And here we see a comparison on a typical day versus drill and lockdown days on how we're seeing the demand on our massive or formerly massive transportation system. So I think we're getting there. We're finding the sweet spot. This, of course, we don't know when, but it's we need to start reopening, right? It's unsustainable to keep the city like this. Unfortunately, for example, in Colombia, we have a very large number of people that get their income from informal activities, right? So they've been suffering a lot, and there's a lot of pressure, not only from them, but also from the, the private sector to start reopening. And so we're trying to think on what that means, how are we going to do that? But more importantly, and this is what's going to be, I guess, really a lot more difficult, it's what is it going to be our new normal? And this is something that Juan Carlos was mentioning too. After all these months, whenever we got the vaccine or even before that, we really need to find a new normal, and that's surely going to be very different. So what is it that we're trying to imagine here? Because it's really complex. There are many variables. Basically, we really need to continue prioritizing sustainable modes, although maybe in a different way. We really need to continue testing, and especially getting feedback from the users and adjusting based on that. And everything needs to be under the framework of very strict health and safety protocols, which pretty much means, social distancing, right? So some ideas right now, everything, of course, is under construction, but we're thinking on some of these lines. We really need to rethink the whole system. We really need to rethink the network, and we need to start kind of like, identifying opportunities and trying to make this into something good somehow. What are we talking about? Rethinking mobility. We really need to reduce the occupancy in public transport. This is very difficult. We've been working for, I don't know, 20 years on really have to get this massive transportation system, and now we need to somehow, I don't even think this is a word, but on massify massive transportation. We really need to push shared mobility, carpooling and things like that. But here there's a bit of a dilemma, because we've been told that we need to be apart from each other, like at least 1 meter. But then here we're telling them to go together in cars. So, like, for example, that's an internal discussion that we have right now. It's, should we promote HOV? But what is that? HOV2, HOV3, HOV maximum capacity of your vehicle -1? Who knows? And this is what's going to be kind of problematic. And we're seeing this already, the car manufacturers, the motorcycle manufacturers are really seeing a good opportunity here to promote the product, because we've been telling them, everybody's telling us that we really need to be apart. We really need to enforce social distance. So what's the best way, Solo trips on motorcycles, solo trips on vehicles. And that's exactly what we do not want, right? Us in the sustainable transportation world. So this is the balance that we need to find. And of course, continue redistributing public space. We're seeing a lot of efforts in different cities by really doing tactical urbanism, just basically stealing lanes from cars and giving it to sidewalks, temporary bicycle lanes, like what I was mentioning. And of course, this is going to be a significant part of what we're trying to implement here. Resilient network. At the end of last year and beginning of this year, Colombia suffered, not at the same scale, but something similar to what happened in Santiago and many other countries, with the massive protests of people and people blocking our system and really, really causing severe delays and problems to the rest of the people that were not participating in those march. And so we really need to rethink our network and try to make it more resilient to all these emergencies, be a natural disaster or a marching of people, whatever. And we really need to make it more flexible, which I'm talking again here about the temporary bike lanes, temporary sidewalks, everything that we can implement fast. And the last part is we're really trying to think this into an opportunity to accomplish things that maybe were not happening the way that we wanted. For example, encourage local manufacturing of cycling, development of massive armies of bicycle mechanics, things like that, the national e-bike industry, or anything related to selling, maintaining, repairing, and using bicycles in any way, cargo bicycles, everything. We really need to stimulate those industries because we're really trying to make this, well, hopefully, the main mode of transportation in the city. Other things like, for example, encourage road maintenance for bike lanes and things like that. And like I said, basically all this is under construction, but I guess the bottom line here is that we're trying to think into how do we make this into an opportunity. And that's all. That's what I had for today. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Sergio. So it's super interesting. A lot of actions being taken by Bogota right now. So we have 10 minutes left. We have over 330 participants right now and many, many questions. So of course, we won't be able to go through all of your questions, but we're going to try to group them into the most relevant ones. Perhaps I'll just start with a question. Before we actually kicked off this webinar, we were just discussing about how it's been challenging for the three of you because you've had to take decisions in a very, very fast manner, which of course it's not the norm. So perhaps each of you can talk just a minute about how do you think this is going to change the way you take decisions in the future? And is this something that obviously no one could have predicted this, but is this something that you had some plans before this, or any way of taking faster decisions and making to adjust very quickly to all these challenges that we've been facing? So perhaps I'll start with you, Lucila. You want to tell us a bit about that? You're muted, Lucila. You're still muted, maybe. Okay, there you go. I think now you're good. Oh, no, sorry, we can't hear you. Well, let me try to fix that. Then we'll go with Juan Carlos. Maybe you can tell us a bit about your side
Okay.
while we fix Lucila's microphone.
Do you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Okay. No, I think the difference for the future is the decisions had to be more intersectorials. No, to involve in the decision more sectors, economy, finance, or working. No. And it's not just a mobility decision, it's a working decision. For example, the opening time and the closing time from the shopping centers or of the schools is a decision that is not of the Ministry of Economics or Education. It's a decision of the city. We have to have a discussion between the mobility, because the life quality and the time for people, to decide which is the opening and the closing time of a lot of activities. And a second difference that I think we have to apply is the feedback with the users. In this moment, if you see what users are telling or doing in his movements, you have technological support to report the movement of the people. You can adjust your decisions maybe day by day about the offer of public transportation, about some cost, about the recruiting of drivers. A lot of it's not just a theoretical planification. We have to see what people are doing and telling to make the decisions. I think that's the most important difference for the future.
Cool. Sergio?
Yeah, I think there are basically two words that pretty much define everything from here on now, flexibility and coordination. We really been facing the need to pretty much make changes every day to almost everything, which is, it's pretty difficult. And we've been lucky to have a lot of coordination and help because, of course, it's different in every country, but we have a set of rules and authorities here in the city that are different from the national government, from the Ministry of Transportation, and we really need a lot of coordination, not only vertical, horizontal, like Juan Carlos was saying, this is not just a mobility or transportation issue, this is a citywide issue. We have a number of committees and task force with all other entities. We're looking at all of these in a comprehensive way. How do we reopen the economy? We're thinking at, we're looking at things like take data from the mobility survey, segmented based on the type of work that people do, see how they move, where they live, how do we start opening, how do they move? For example, looking at economic sectors that primarily or majoritarily move either by bicycle or transit, and try to treat those people in a different way, try to really enforce different schedules, not only for public entities, but for private sectors. So there's a need for a huge level of coordination. And of course, here, it's very important to have the support of entities, like all of you guys, NUMO, GIZ, EUROCLIMA, everybody, because you guys are becoming kind of like our intellectual and our strong arm, because while we look to the left and try to put up a fire, we look to the right and ask you guys for help and data and everything, and that has been really helpful. So again, to me, the most important thing right now is to have the flexibility to change everything, really everything, even our most bottom line assumptions about how the city should move, and to be coordinated across all levels, vertical, horizontal, and transversal.
Excellent. Thanks, Sergio. We're going to try with Lucila again. Maybe your microphone works right now.
Hi, now it's working?
Yes. Yes, perfect.
So I am totally agree with my colleagues. I believe that we are facing something we don't know what is gonna happen. We don't know when it's gonna end. So we need a strong coordination between the different areas inside the government, and we are a local government, so we need also to coordinate with the national governments. And it's very important also to be in touch with the other cities, in our case, to understand what they are doing. We are facing challenge every day from the sustainability, the finance sustainability of the systems, because we are losing passengers, and someone has to pay for that, to the subways and the buses, and also for the social distances that we have to guarantee for the next, we don't know if we have to do it for 3, 6, or 10 months. So things are changing very fast, and we need coordination, and we need to have very fresh and deep information about what is going good in other cities and what is going bad, so to understand and change.
Excellent. Thank you, Lucila. So we're just wrapping up right now. We're at time. So I want to thank the three of you very, very much for all this information you have shared with all of us. As I mentioned, we're over 330 people in this webinar. So hopefully the information you are sharing with a lot of the people here will be useful to others who are doing. Again, we didn't have really much time to go through all the questions. So I'll share those questions with you, and we'll figure out a way to get them to the attendees. And I would also like to thank our partners, TUMI, GIZ, EUROCLIMA, Mobilize Your City, for all our support. And as I mentioned from the start, this is just the first webinar in a series of webinars that we will be doing. So stay tuned for the next one, which will be happening in 2 weeks. So thanks everyone, and have a good rest of your days.